We are unpacking a tragic weekend of violent incidents. We have the latest on Capitol Hill's healthcare fights and what Jasmine Crockett said that got her in trouble this weekend. All of that and so much more today on 10 Minute Drill.
Everybody get up, get up.
The story of America is the story of an adventure.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
We are a nation under God, and I believe God intended for us to be free.
We begin today looking at tragic incidents that happened around the world. First, in Australia. Just weeks after a radical Islamic terrorist opened fire on National Guard in D.C., just blocks from the White House, 2 Islamic terrorists opened fire on a Hanukkah celebration in Australia. Among the victims, an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor, a 10-year-old girl, a young father of 5 who just welcomed a new baby in October. Then in Providence, Rhode Island, on Brown University campus, a shooting Saturday night left 2 dead. The victims at Brown include Ella Cook from Birmingham, Alabama, and Muhammad Aziz Umarakazov from Uzbekistan, who both were studying at Brown University. Ella was the vice president of the College Republicans at Brown University. The shooter remains at large after an eventful weekend where a previous person of interest had been named and then released. One House Democrat candidate running from Pennsylvania got himself in hot water with his reaction. Bob Brooks wrote, 2 killed in Providence, 11 killed in Sydney. Deeply tragic, and it didn't have to happen. Sensible gun safety laws save lives. Holding the Brown University community and the Jewish community in Sydney in my thoughts today. Only to delete that post and repost shortly after, omitting the Jewish community in Sydney so that it just said, holding the Brown University community in my thoughts today. Both of these events are starting an important conversation about violence. The shooting in Sydney particularly focused on the rise in anti-Semitism around the world. At the same time, there have been multiple major Hanukkah events that were canceled out of fear of radical Islamic terrorism and threats against them. Many are pointing out that this is what globalizing the Intifada, something made famous by New York mayoral candidate Zoran Mandami and several others, looks like in practice. It is a massive, massive warning sign to the West that they need to start looking at the people that are chanting these things and the ties they might have to terrorist groups to actually carry out this kind of violence. Moving over to Capitol Hill, it is now 9 days until Christmas, and it is the time of year for one last mad dash on policy priorities. This week, just like last week, the focus is on healthcare. Republicans are trying to find a path forward for a number of different healthcare components, from issues we've talked about, like healthcare price transparency, to health savings accounts, while also trying to find a way to deal with these pandemic premium subsidies that overwhelmingly go to rich people. Republicans have talked about things like income caps, so that they could continue those subsidies for people who actually need them while cutting them off for wealthy people who don't, and trying to cut into the fraud we've talked about here recently. Those who are not willing to sit down at the table and discuss fixes, Democrats. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was asked last week whether she would be willing to extend those pandemic subsidies if it meant including protections against taxpayer dollars funding abortions. And here's what she said.
Is an extension with those abortion restrictions better than no extension at all?
An extension with abortion restrictions kills women. So no, I'm not going to allow this Republican majority to kill women.
Now let me just pull out what she's actually saying there. Democrats like AOC would rather have these subsidies expire. They're calling the end of these subsidies life or death for people, but they would rather have those subsidies expire than continue with protections against letting these funds be used for abortion. There's something called the Hyde Amendment that's existed for decades that's prevented taxpayer dollars from funding abortions. That has existed for a very long time. Republicans are saying if these subsidies are extended, there need to be Hyde protections that prevent taxpayer dollars from going to abortion. AOC and Democrats care more about abortion than actually extending these subsidies to people who need them. But the other thing that I want to get to here is I would love if one reporter would ask AOC if she believes that subsidies should go to families making $500,000 or $600,000 a year as they do now, because that is what Democrats are demanding these be extended to without any fixes. They are refusing any discussion about income caps. And I would love for people like AOC to answer whether they actually believe taxpayers at the lowest income bracket should have to pay for subsidies for wealthy people. Last point on this topic I would make is the Democrats have done a very good job of convincing people that premiums rising at the end of this year is only due to these pandemic premium subsidies expiring. But a study highlights the fact that only 3.3% of the increase in premiums is due to these subsidies expiring. The rest is just due to Obamacare being terrible. If you look at that table, the orange there is 3.3%. That's the entire hike that is coming from these pandemic premium subsidies expiring. The rest is just due to Obamacare being terrible. So Republicans have to get out and continue to remind people what's actually at stake here. Democrats are demanding pandemic premium subsidies for families making over $400,000, $500,000 a year, while Republicans are saying, let's cut fraud, waste, and abuse so these healthcare dollars can get to people who actually need them. As we get closer to Christmas, you might be seeing an uptick in fun, heartfelt Christmas commercials like this.
Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad.
I love these. I love the Coca-Cola Polar Bear. I love, the M&M's Christmas commercials. I love these car commercials because I think it's fun, it's heartfelt, they play at our heartstrings the right way. A Trump advisor, Steve Moore, of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, former scholar at the Heritage Foundation, has an op-ed in the Daily Wire this week talking about how those types of commercials are at risk. Bernie Sanders' latest crusade could kill your favorite Christmas commercials. A top Trump advisor warns that banning pharmaceutical ads would do more harm than good. Of that Chevy commercial, Steve writes, it's the kind of commercial American companies have long excelled at, emotionally evocative in all the right ways, tapping into nostalgia, family, and the warmth of the season, and yes, selling a product. Holiday ads have become a part of our cultural fabric. Think of Coca-Cola's Polar Bears or the Budweiser Clydesdales. These ads don't just market products, they help set the tone for the season. Ads like these may not survive if Washington continues down a troubling road of restricting TV commercials for politically unpopular but legal products. At the top of his list is pharmaceutical ads, which Senator Bernie Sanders wants removed from the airwaves. In that fight, he has an unlikely ally, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, what Moore is arguing there is while a lot of people might have distrust of the pharmaceutical industry, particularly after COVID, it is a scary, slippery slope to give government the power to stop or ban or limit commercial speech in ads. Moore argues, what's to stop a future Democrat administration from using similar arguments to ban ads for gas-powered cars or even disposable diapers? So as you enjoy holiday commercials this season, think about the implications of policies like that. Here on the 10-Minute Drill, we have actively enjoyed covering the entrance of Jasmine Crockett into the Texas Senate race because she creates a whole lot of content. Over the weekend in an interview, she said this.
You can decide that you're going to vote for a DRR because it's just kind of what makes sense, or you can decide that you're going to vote for somebody that understands the struggle of the farmer and the rancher, or what it is to live in rural Texas.
Now that sounds like a very good pitch. You want somebody who understands the plight of farmers and ranchers if you want to represent a state like Texas. However, just a few weeks ago, she also said this.
The fact is, ain't none of y'all trying to go and farm right now. You're not. We done picking cotton.
So that was Jasmine Crockett arguing for higher levels of immigration, saying none of you want to farm and we're done picking cotton, which I think probably will not play particularly well in Texas, but that campaign is going super well. In what's becoming a regular segment here at 10-Minute Drill, today we're going to talk about another instance of Democrats not understanding how charts work, because in this case, this highlights a major challenge for Democrats where they're trying to argue President Trump is at fault for something when actually the charts they're highlighting show that Democrats were responsible for something. Take this chart. This is a chart showing U.S. electricity prices, the average U.S. electricity price, dollar per kilowatt hour. And it starts back in 2014 and has a very large jump between 2020 and 2024. Chris Murphy tweets, "This is important, especially that part about, in all caps, costs going up because Trump is making them go up, not because of natural economic factors." However, when you look closely at the chart, what you realize is everything he's showing is the Biden years. As you look at that side by side, with one showing what the Biden years were and what President Trump was. It's important because Chris Murphy and Democrats are trying as hard as they can to say that Donald Trump is responsible for their rising electricity and utility costs, when we can point out the exact policies Democrats championed that drove up those costs by attacking supply of natural gas, of nuclear energy, of coal, all of the things that these states rely on. Democrats attack those with surgical precision and now want you to look at a chart that only shows the Biden presidency, look at it and say, oh, look what Donald Trump did. And it doesn't make any sense, but it does, again, help us remind everyone that when Democrats are saying that, they are clearly lying. For today's You Can't Make It Up segment, we go back to Tim Walz. Now, as we've discussed over the last several weeks, the fallout from this massive $1 billion Minnesota fraud scandal continues. We've talked a lot about Keith Ellison, the Minnesota Attorney General, and his role in covering this up. Tim Walz also has done a terrible job managing the fallout from this. Here is him in a press conference asked if he believes that the Somali community should be doing more to police themselves against this type of terrible fraudulent behavior.
What do you want to hear more from, instead of just saying, don't blame us? Do you want to see more ownership and oversight from within this?
Look, it's not law-abiding citizens. If that were the case, there's a lot of white men should be holding a lot of white men accountable for the crimes that they have committed.
Tim Walz, clearly still living in a previous era where just blaming white men for everything was all you needed to do to survive in Democrat politics, is showing here that he has no interest in actually bringing about accountability. And I think that's going to chase him for a long time. But the what about white men pivot is not a very strong suit here, which again, for someone who is so strong,
I think some of us scare them. I think I scare them a little bit why they spend so much time on this. No, I'm serious, because I can fix a truck. They know I'm not on this. Yeah. I'm not putting this in people's grill. I don't know if my identity is not hunting. My identity is not football coaching.
We know that your identity is not hunting because we've seen you try and rack a shotgun. And we know your identity is not coaching because of that time you tweeted about running a pick six. We know that this was all manufactured by the campaign, but that does not stop us from enjoying watching you try to do it. Thank you for the memories, Tim. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us here on 10 Minute Drill. Please like, subscribe, tell a friend. See you next time.